Hey, hi, hello, and welcome. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is TitaniumBuilt or Tanya. You can call me either or. And for those returning Titans, thanks again for returning for yet another upload. I really do appreciate you guys coming and taking the time to hang out with me each and every time I do upload another case. I will say my eye is getting a little better, so for those of you guys who don't normally follow my channel and you're curious to know why I'm winking at you right now, it's because I had a surgery done a couple Fridays ago and I'm just still recovering from that. So hopefully it doesn't take a distraction from the case, but I just wanted to kind of address the elephant in the room before we even get started with today's case coverage. New information has come to light in the dylanrounds missing person investigation, and I figured we could talk about it, because that's what we do on this channel. Before we get into this case, I wanted to give you a refresher in this case in case you forgot anything that has happened, or maybe you just don't know about the dylanrounds, case you may not know. It's been 5 months since 19-year-old Dylan Rounds went missing from his farm in Lucid, Utah. If you've seen pictures of that, you would know it's an extremely desolate area and it's on the border of Nevada. Dylan had bought the land with the help of his grandfather. He loved to farm. The land is very desolate, and that's what made it very cheap, and the land itself was what people had deemed at the time unfarmable. So nobody else really wanted to buy that land anyway. He loved farming, like I said, and when his parents had divorced, that's where a lot of his time was spent. He even quit school to actually start farming full time, which I think is a little cool, even though I wouldn't suggest it because kids stay in school really. But if you're going to do something like that, farming at 5 a.m., feeding crops, doing that kind of, not, feeding the crops, but, feeding the animals, things like that, watering the crops, doing all those chores with the machinery. And I don't even know where to start. I couldn't be a farmer. And so for him to want to do that full time, it really meant that he was very, very passionate about it and determined. So if he wanted to quit school in order to farm, his parents thought that it was okay to do that. 28th, that's exactly what he was doing. And nobody has heard from him since. There's been no sign of Dylan anywhere and no activity on his cell phone and bank account. That's what his parents have said. Chase Ventura, 41, and James Brenner, 59, two men who interacted with Dylan in the days before he vanished, were arrested in July on felony gun crimes in Utah. They have not been charged in connection to Dylan's disappearance, but Dylan's parents strongly believe that Brenner was the one who was squatting, on a nearby property, knows what happened to their son. They believe boots belonging to Dylan that was found behind a dirt pile on his property with blood on them were put there by Brenner. Brenner has admitted he's the one who took the boots out there. Candace Cooley, Dylan's mom, has said in an interview. He said he found them by the shed that's on the property, and the shed is where Dylan parks his grain truck a lot of times. He moved them over by his camper somewhere and then decided Dylan wasn't coming back for them. These were the boots that Dylan also wore every day. Dylan's parents said pings on their son's cell phone show it never left his property on the day he vanished, and his phone was found in the bottom of Lucid Pond on June 18th. Right after the last phone call to his grandmother on May 28th, Dylan called Jim Brenner, Dylan's mother said. Then he went up to Jim's. The phone did anyways. And he was around there for a little while. Then it went back to Dylan's place and then went back to Jim Brenner's again. This is new information that they have just released because the parents are just kind of sick of the police not policing this at all. He placed himself at the pond the day that Dylan disappeared. Dylan's phone was found in the pond. Not a rocket science, right? No unusual information or evidence of where Dylan could be was found on the phone, according to his parents. When his parents visited the property the Monday after Dylan disappeared, they searched his camp trailer looking for his pistol. He had a trailer on the land that he would stay in if he needed to be close to his crops. His parents checked the trailer and they noticed that Dylan's key, like his key fob,
to his truck was missing along with one of his guns. After they checked the entire trailer, they went back and they looked. And it looked like someone had placed one of the guns alongside the key fob inside of the trailer. After they had already searched that trailer, all of a sudden it's come up again. His parents say one point of interest in the investigation is a shed near Brenner's camper. The shed was used by Dylan to hold his equipment. The landowner that he knew gave him permission to use this land. A few days after Dylan disappeared, the Rounds say, along with law enforcement, they watched Brenner spend time in this shed. And they knew that their son was going to the shed the night that he disappeared because there was going to be a rain and he didn't want his grains to get wet. So he decided to go ahead and park his truck in that shed that evening. Brenner pulled the grain truck out on his own and he cleaned it. And they were watching him do this. He was cleaning the shed with law enforcement and them just standing there, just kind of like watching him, not doing anything about the situation. Not like the parents possibly could do anything about the situation, but the police probably could, right? I saw him, this is a direct quote from the mother, I saw him take out 4 trash bags and put them in the back of his pickup. Wow. On the 27th, 2 people said they saw Dylan earlier in the day, and it was known that Dylan went to work on the farm that evening. That night, he had called his grandparents, or grandmother actually, to tell her that he had to put his grain truck in the shed, that the one that he was allowed to use because, he had permission from the landowner, and he didn't want his cross to be ruined. So that's why he was taking the truck over there and that he would call her back. He always called back and he always stayed in touch. He didn't this night. So the next day, after she didn't hear from him, that's when she reached out to a family friend who is Don Hagley and asked him to go over to the land and check on Dylan. Don Hagley said that him and James Brenner had went over to the farm and didn't find anything, but not to worry. Maybe he just went to the town over. But they did notify his grandmother the next day that they still didn't see him. So that's when the family went over to the farm. So when they got there, the C truck was in the shed and that his personal truck was back at the farm, just like usual. Evidence shows that the truck was pulled in after it rained and that the other truck appeared to have been pressure washed. But there was a large amount of mud underneath, like it had been driven through the mud. So evidence showed that the first truck had been pulled in after it had been raining because the tire tracks. And then his other vehicle looked like it had been pressure washed, his own personal truck, which he never did, according to his own family. It seemed to be being pressure washed, but underneath you could still see the mud from somebody being out, most likely in the rain. So what does that tell you? They couldn't get the truck open because they didn't have the key fob. So they broke the window to get in. They asked the officers if that was okay, and they said that was. The seat was pulled all the way up. So either somebody short was driving or they pulled it up in order to clean it out better. Also, the 4-wheel drive is shifted into gear, and Dylan knew that was broken. So why would someone, or why would he try to use something he knew wasn't going to be able to help him out? They also couldn't find Dylan's pistol that was, in the truck, they believed. In the bathroom, there was also an empty gun case. Right after that discovery, that's when they found the boots behind a dirt mound, about 100 yards away from his house. He wore those type of boots his whole life, so his family immediately knew right away that they were his. He wouldn't leave without his shoes, so that made his family very concerned, and I agree. The boots were also clean, so it didn't look like he was wearing them around in the rain. It didn't have any, wet mud or dry mud on them. The officers took the boots into evidence because there was a spot on which appeared to be blood on them. The officers wanted to take them to test them for DNA. So that makes sense, right? A week prior to Dylan's disappearance, he had told his mother that he had a strange encounter with a man in the desert named Chase. Dylan said the man asked him for a ride, but that he did not give him a ride, but he also said that he wanted to use Dylan's phone. He said that he didn't give him a ride that day, but people around the area said that they did in fact see Dylan and Chase together inside of Dylan's car or truck. So of course the parents wanted to know who this Chase character was. He did come forward to the police and he did tell them, hey, I wasn't around that day, and the police kind of brushed him off, like, whatever, like they didn't really even care. He did finally prove where he was, though. This is when Dylan's parents were like, okay, the police don't want to help our son and our son's case, so we're going to have to do it ourselves. A week later, it was discovered also that the boots were still left in the officer's car that was supposed to take these said boots in to be tested for evidence, especially because there might have been blood evidence on the actual boots that were in the car. This is about the time that, Dylan's parents went and they took to social and, hey, we were here to receive the call and we were here to help. One YouTuber used his own drone, in fact, and they did find tracks leading down to a wash area. So, of course, they called the police station so that the police could match the tire tracks because they have Dylan's truck. Since Dylan's case reached the true crime community, you then had YouTubers dissecting every word that came out of Dylan's parents' mouth. It was bad. They found interviews where she was contradicting herself and the evidence they had in hand. It did make them feel that maybe Candace was being a little dishonest in what she was saying about the case. Then Chase Ventra's story came out. Both of them loosened around the same time Dylan may have gone missing. The case is confusing, I know, it really is. But then we hear about Jim Brenner and how he had actually been charged with an attempted murder about 30 years ago and apparently has a violent temper and a drinking problem. He also had a felony warrant out for his arrest during this time. He was arrested for having a gun, and finally he did get arrested for having a gun and being a felon. There have been so many different, though, YouTube people included, and just different stories being told on YouTube, TikTok, and you name it about this Dylan Rounds case. It really just gets really washed up and confusing if you start deep diving into each rabbit hole you can go down. When questioned, Jim Brenner said that he's actually been home all day, Saturday and Sunday, until he left his house and he stopped by a nearby pond. He then went to Don's house for a barbecue. He said he didn't see anyone that weekend and hadn't seen Dylan there in months. That's all we had until recently when Dylan's parents decided to go on an interview and show everything they had evidence-wise, the information that could be going around and a lot of misconceptions that are floating around. Now we know a little bit more than what we knew before with his parents coming out. We now know that Box Elder, who started getting assistance from the FBI, told them to keep certain information to themselves to protect the case. But there was also a lot of times when people would slip up and they would say something different, contradicting what he actually said before by telling them to kind of be quiet. Then people were all confused yet again. This was mainly because his grandparents had brought a key fob and one was missing. So they kind of thought, wait, the key fob was there and it's not missing. So they just took that as it wasn't missing. The gun was still missing from the truck and it's still missing. They did talk about finding a gun, but that wasn't his pistol. That was, and not the pistol from his truck. That was actually a shotgun that they found at a friend's house. So that's why everyone was confused on what to believe. But now that we know more info from the family and we now have the actual key fob and gun because it was located in his trailer and his friends walked in one day and they walked in and they saw them just sitting there, the gun and the key fob. It was not there before any of this. It was not there. The family had been there. They were cleaning. They were checking. They had not found that gun or key fob, and it was sitting out in plain sight. There are only 2 people with access to Dylan's trailer besides his close family, And that would have been Jim or Don, maybe possibly Kurt, a third guy. Another piece of information that was kept from the public that we now know is there was another call that night on Dylan's phone, the night that he disappeared, after he talked to his grandmother. This would have been before he went to put his truck in the grain shed. In the beginning of the investigation, we were told that there was only one ping on his phone, but I guess there was actually multiple that evening. His cell phone actually placed a call to Jim, and we think it was to open the gate so that he could put his truck in the shed. After that, there's pings all over Brenner's and Dylan's, also at Lucen Pond, where they later found his phone. In Jim's alibi, he places himself at the pond. There were also horse tracks found by the pond as well, and we know that Jim has a horse. We just do. He also moved Dylan's boots to behind the dirt pile because he said he didn't think that Dylan wants them or would need them. So he's putting his fingerprints on the boots as well. All of this as evidence that has been, found out by his parents. And that is what's so sad. We understand the confusion now because the officers told them to stay quiet, and they thought they were doing the right thing at the time by staying quiet. They thought they were helping keep evidence, close to the vest. That way their son would be found by the police, or at least an attempt that their son would be found. Jim Brenner at the time doesn't have a lawyer, but according to Dylan's mom, he hasn't even been interrogated. Nope, not at all. He already keeps telling on himself. You think that he would start talking, but I guess he's not going to talk if they're not going to talk to him, But I'm sure that if they did talk to him, maybe they would get some of these lies and some of the bullcrap that he's been throwing around to us about Dylan's case. Because he knows, I believe, where Dylan is, in my humble opinion. Fox Elder has labeled this case as a homicide. They don't want anyone to take over this case, though. And they said that no one will come over there and take over their case. They are a small police department, and I feel like they need really a lot of help. They have messed this case up at every turn. They wouldn't compare the tire tracks. They wouldn't talk to Jim. And the boots that he put there in the dirt pile, I just don't get it. I just don't understand. And now on June 2nd, they can see Jim cleaning out the shed. And since he hasn't been named a person of interest, nobody can stop him. And he took out 4 black trash bags full of items, and the shed was still really full. So he picked out individual items that he wanted to take for a specific cause or reason. He had a felony arrest warrant at the time, so they could have picked him up on that and took those trash bags into evidence to see what was inside of them. But they did not do that. They let him take those trash bags off the property, and no one knows where they were sent to. If that was me and I was the parents, if I was there and I was witnessing this, I would be following him in my own car to pick up those said trash bags. But the officers could have arrested him, and they didn't. They just watched him do it. One YouTuber reached out to Fox Elder saying that he would help them search with the drone that he had helped, before, used free of charge. He'll help them, with anything that he can help them with. Apparently, it didn't detect any disturbances in any dirt, any graves, and it could do all this stuff. It can detect anything that's wrong in anything, any soil, any type of soil. But apparently, they said no to this. They declined. So yet again, Dylan's parents are going to use the drone with the help of this YouTuber, and they are going to just fork over the cost, or I'm sure the YouTuber is going to help them in the search for their son. So at this point, what the hell is going on with this police department? They have basically had all this information given to them, and they have had every chance to send out and test evidence, and they failed to do so. So Dylan's parents are trying to look for him before it gets too cold out. They have professionals coming in to help. Dylan's mom stated more than once that a private agency is coming in to help with the search. And I believe it's actually more than one. And they're asking for volunteers to help in the search for their son. So if you are in the Lucen area, please reach out and help any way you guys can. Utah is about 7 states away from me, so it's a little far from me anyway. That's all that we have on this case for now, unfortunately. But I am hoping that they will find more before winter really sets in. We're already in November as I'm recording this. But with that being said, and that being, maybe it's in Nevada, maybe it won't be as cold as we think there. And they'll be able to get a little more time to search because of the warmer weather. That's what I'm hoping and praying for, anyways. So, what do you think about today's case? Do you think that they're going to find Dylan? Do you think that Jim Brenner did it? Do you think that it could have been an accident and Jim Brenner did it and maybe covered it up? What do you guys think? Do you think that maybe that night Dylan went up to the fence to put his grain truck in just like he did anytime it rained before? But that particular evening, he saw there was a new lock on the fence that Jim had put on, which in reality was to protect his horse that was in there. He didn't know that I guess Dylan had been staying there often, so maybe a fight ensued after he got to the lock and saw that it was locked and he couldn't just pull his grain truck in. That's a lot of money if you're thinking about it. If you're a farmer, that's like your babies. So I don't know. You let me know down in the comments. Also, if you made it to the end of my video and you did appreciate today's case coverage, I really hope that you'll consider subscribing by clicking the little subscription button below and the bell icon to be alerted to new content. And if you want to be a true pal, you can give this video a thumbs up. That would be great, great, great. And I'm sorry about in the beginning of this video, I did forget to plug in my mic, so I'm sorry about the sound quality. It was a little bad. But I will see you guys in my next video. Thanks, guys.